You're listening to Trysteropod, episode 16. I'm David Kulma, the other guy is Dorian Wallace. We're classical composers in the 21st century who also are left-wing people who are talk about politics and music here.
Yeah.
How's it going today, Dorian?
Oh, fighting with a racist right now on... well, actually, I haven't actually started the fight. Well, sorry. I started the fight. He hasn't responded yet.
Oh, God.
My brother sent me a screenshot of somebody he went to school with. This is a percussionist, I guess, some in Akron. I don't know, whatever. I'm not gonna say his name because just it's not necessary at this particular point because I don't know him. But let me just tell you what he wrote. You're gonna vomit. Every listener is going to vomit when they hear this.
Good thing I haven't eaten in a few hours.
Yeah. According to Newton's third law, there is an equal and opposite action. Though he wrote this to understand motion, it can be argued that this law applies to all things in life, for all things are in motion. That is, they are moving through space and time.
Uh-huh.
Therefore, the opposite of white privilege would be black privilege.
Oh, there you go.
Not sure what black privilege is? Let's explain. Black History Month is a black privilege. No other color has a month of history. Black privilege is being able to say N, and then he put a whole bunch of asterisks, without repercussions, just as being called a racist. Without repercussions, such as being called a racist. Just because someone says it with an A at the end versus an ER does not qualify a difference in meaning. Otherwise, the words respect and respect would have different meanings. These are just a couple of things that pertain to black privilege, of which there is more. If white privilege should be denounced, then black privilege should be denounced too. This way, all peoples are then equal, and no one person or group has anything over another. Otherwise, it just demonstrates how jealous and envious a person is over another. The age-old statement from a child, "They got more than me," is what comes to play here. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through to look at his comments really quickly, and my brother commented, "Dude, you're a fucking racist," which is beautiful. And then somebody else responded,
I'm not sure that's
he
the
is
right
a race.
tactic.
Yeah, no, my brother's more forceful than I am.
Sure.
But the thing is, it's like, the guy is being a racist. Like, so blah, 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 I'm not going to read through all of these comments, though we could do that if he doesn't respond. But I'll read you just...
Let's take a step back.
Sure. Well, would you like to hear my comment that I put on his thing?
And
then we'll go on. Yeah.
Sounds good.
I went, so what are your thoughts on the war on drugs, redlining, mass incarceration, subprime mortgages, employment discrimination, Jim Crow laws, bans on interracial marriage, education discrimination, white flight, historical omissions, etc.? And by using the third law as an example, are you saying that white and black people are opposites? Last question. What is white privilege to you?
Okay. So...
All right, let's break it down. Fine. And if he responds, we can craft a response together.
Okay. So... This is where... the classic American conservative mindset versus a more liberal one literally just ends up shouting past each other.
Yeah.
And no one really learns.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, to be fair to this guy, he just said something extremely ignorant. First of all, he's ignorant of what the fuck Newton was talking about. We'll set the science aside here. Just like, people have been doing the thing he just did, which is science says this process is the way reality works to the best that we can understand it right now. Therefore, human social interactions should be thus. That's called the most famous version of that is social Darwinism, and we know how beautifully that's gone for the past 150 years. It's been a debacle of human destruction. The application of evolutionary precepts to human social interaction has just been a disgusting, horrible thing, right? So applying that to laws of gravity, motion, I mean, anyway. But the larger point for me, so whenever I end up what was one of these things, I always like taking a step back rather than taking him point by point, which is the thing you were doing, right? You're saying there are these points you're ignoring in your analysis. I like to think about why is it that he's saying these things, and why does he think they're right?
Yeah.
I think that's a more interesting question because that allows us to talk to him in a way that would actually reach him, right? Because just listing, because he's got a pat answer. Someone's told him the answer to your question, right? He has an answer to. A conservative person has an answer to historical injustice, even if historical injustice is still happening now, right? A history of injustice apparently doesn't bother him in this situation because he feels oppressed. And this is why it's so dangerous for us to base all of our ideologies around oppression, because everyone feels oppressed. So you're just legitimize other people's oppression, even if yours is more. Then we're literally doing scales, and the real goal is to eliminate oppression. So then you're just hashing out with each other whether or not who's more oppressed. And I don't know about you, but the Oppression Olympics is one of the most mind-numbingly painful things to participate in.
Yes.
Even if you're a particular kind of white person who's given up the Oppression Olympics and you go, I'm sorry, it's my fault. And that's called white guilt, which is also a thing that's racist. So, I mean, so to me, the more important point is, so why do you think he thinks this?
Well,
because we know people who think this way.
Yes. So, I do need to read this little tidbit for you also. So a new
it's continuously
this just in. So somebody had written, I've known this guy for 15 or more years. I've seen him work for and collaborate with people of every ethnic background and show equal respect to all. Not one time have I ever heard him disparage another individual or even belittle another individual based on race, creed, religion, etc. Yes, he is asking questions that can be debated, but many of you are responding with derogatory speech and slurs. Thus, racism's a slur, by the way.
I know.
Yeah. Thus becoming what you accuse him of. Has some white culture...
This is the answer. This is the thing I would say. This is the thing I said they would have. This answer.
Yeah. Well. So has wait till you get into. Wait, you gotta hear the.
Sure, go. I'm not saying. I'm not saying stop. Just keep going.
This is a page turner. Has some white culture been oblivious to Black American history and fed into the stereotypes of racism, prejudice, and bigotry? Of course, but not all. Has some Black culture played into... Okay, whatever. He's writing the thing we all knew he would say.
Exactly. This is the thing I said. He's going to write this thing.
So then, my brother writes, nah, he's racist for saying this stuff. So I know.
This is the reason. Here's the reason.
Hold on. The real page turner. It gets better. It gets better. So somebody else chimes in, and I write in, racism has nothing to do with being kind or evil. Racism is a system, not an individual act. And then the guy who wrote the original thing, the one that had the response we all knew he was going to have, he went, good to know. So there's this concept I love, which is conservatives reaching the point and still missing the point. He nails it on the head. This guy responds with, he tags me and he goes, good to know. By that rationale, nothing we do as an individual act is racist, such as an individual police officer choking a man to death. The racist system did that to him. I see where this type of thinking comes from. I guess we're all guilty then. And I don't know how to be like, yeah, man. You nailed it.
Right. Well, that's the thing is, like, they understand your point, and they say, that is so ridiculous, I won't even consider it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it literally comes down to whose comfortable definition of racism you use. That's what these arguments all hinge on a definition of racist that no one agrees on, because they group into two directions, and those directions are ones that support your ideology that you already have.
Yeah.
So the right-wing ideology says that individualism is the grandest thing that's most important outside of the hierarchical structure of society. So the hierarchy of society is done to protect the individual. Therefore, racism is a thing I think and feel in my head, and if I don't recognize it in myself, I'm not racist.
Yeah.
Whereas the liberal, we'll call it the liberal definition of racism, because they don't do anything about it, is this idea that racism is a system whereby individual actions are therefore discounted or just chalked up to circumstances in order to make it so that you're focusing on a larger thing that is societal. And I'm having trouble coming up with what the problems with that are. I know that there are some. It's just they're not coming to my brain in the moment. But it's that definitional. And notice that each group in this argument thinks the other person is crazy for believing the other definition. Right?
So, I have a real question to ask you, David.
Yeah.
In just moments ago, before jumping onto this with you, I was in a conversation with a collaborator I'm working on a piece with right now.
Sure.
Her name is Bonita Oliver. She's a really, really unbelievable performance artist, and we're creating, basically, it's a Wayjourners cantata together.
Okay.
So she's a black woman, and we have been very upfront about how to get into some of the subject matters that we're speaking on. And it has taken us to some very uncomfortable places. Uncomfortable for very different reasons, but uncomfortable places. And it's been a very great experience, honestly, just diving into all of this. But so the conversation I had a little bit ago was that I had done something that with my privilege, I didn't even think about it after it had taken place.
Of course.
And so she wanted to ask me about this thing. And this is something that had happened maybe a week ago. And I'll just be totally upfront. So what had happened was we did a performance on, there was a phone banking No. Sorry, there was an improvisation concert on Facebook live stream, and she and I have been improvising together a lot recently. Oh wait, do we want to do the recording thing at 15 minutes?
Keep telling the story.
Cool, and then when the story's done, we can do it.
I'll decide when it happens.
Great. So basically we did this performance, and we've been improvising a lot together via Zoom. And she does a lot of lyrical content, much of which is right now about racial disparity. And it's just, fine-tuning more and more and more into what we're coming across. Anyways, in the middle of her, there was one point I had stopped playing and she was speaking. I did the power fist.
Okay.
And so she said, she was like, I want to, tell you, like, and she kept doing the, like, I'm not saying like all black people think this, like, I'm just saying that, for me it may, and it was like, okay, just please be upfront, like, you don't have to like worry about my like pain or agony, like, what did you feel? And she was like, it felt like a white person saying the N-word because they think that they're cool, like, somebody coming up to Dave Chappelle and saying the N-word because they thought his bit was funny. She said that's what it felt like. She's like, I know the symbol has a lot more meaning to it in a lot of realms, but in that very moment I felt like it was a white person who I've gotten close to just said the N-word in front of me, and it felt like, and I was like, so did it feel like cultural appropriation? She was like, yes it did. So then we talked about it much further, and so first and foremost, it was fucking uncomfortable for me, to talk about this, because it was like, okay, well, let's get into some of this. I'm a part of a lot of left-wing groups, and we do the fist, like in groups and blah, 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 blah. And it really, without getting through the full length of the conversation, it came down to, it's based on context. Meaning that she's like, yeah, if I see like a whole group of left-wing, like, white people singing songs in a protest, that's not the same. Whereas when I'm speaking about black oppression and there's one black person and one white person, and the white person does the fist and the black person has not done the fist, that feels like appropriation. And it was like, oh my God, okay. So
it's like when somebody, to use a less fraught example, it would be like if somebody goes in for a handshake and the other person hugs them. It's that kind of interpersonal interaction, it sounds like she's describing, where she was assuming a certain kind of interaction and you were too forward. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a very good way to put it. Well, so the question I wanted to ask you is, well, and first off, like, I gave her my philosophy on, like, it's like being a politically oriented performer, you have to take into account that you're going to say things and do things on stage and in performance that are going to offend people. For instance, if I say fuck Donald Trump on stage, which I have, and somebody walks out, which they have, I'm okay with that because, it's like, I don't mind that I offended this person. Okay. However, somebody who I do have a relationship with, a musical and a friendship-based relationship with, having them have any sort of pain, that is not a consequence that I am willing to be responsible for, or to that I want to push, if that makes any sense. You don't want to actually have that happen. You're trying to avoid I don't want to be I want to avoid any kind of pain infliction. But to get a little bit more into that,
like the one thing she said where she was like, no, I don't know if other black people would fail this way. Like, she's like, this is what I felt in that moment, but I don't want to assume like other black people would, some might be okay with it. And I was like, yes, but like the fact that one black person is feeling this means that it's out there. Like, and I don't want to be a part of it. Like, I brought it down to sort of psychology because in our back and forth, I said something about like I need to continuously check myself. And I was in a meeting a few weeks ago for my music therapy group, and we were talking about this is all the nurses and everybody who works there, like the other professionals. Mm-hmm. The majority of the group is black women because they're nurses. It's mostly black women that were in this group, and yet the person who's in charge of the group is a white woman. And in the middle of like everybody saying their grievances, the white woman said, "Now, I've always been a person who's seen myself on the side of good, but this is and it was just like, what kind of a weird fucking precursor is that?" So I didn't want to come off in that same way of being like, well, as a white person who's always been on the good side, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's almost like making excuses or putting a defensiveness up.
Of course.
The point, like, what I got into was, this is a humbling reminder that as a white person who is aiming to be on the side of allyship, there's still work that needs to be done. And so what I ended up saying was, I said, I can't let myself get too comfortable. And she was like, no, I'm not saying you can't be comfortable. And so it was like, all right, reframe. So I took it to a more personal level, and it was like, my wife and I, we do a lot of work as far as the way we communicate to one another. In regards to like, Heinel and I have a very healthy relationship, but last week we were both feeling a lot of stress, and we started to kind of irk at each other. And we had a conversation that, even though we're in a good spot and nothing negative is taking place, just the fact that like we're irking each other a little bit, we need to remind ourselves to keep doing work on our relationship. Put that in a social, like a more societal level. Being an ally doesn't mean that you should stop doing work, and you can still make mistakes, and it's how you respond to those mistakes. So all of this setup was to ask you, for some reason, making the comparison of the one-on-one experience of being at home versus the societal norms, it made it much easier to talk about and then put it into societal norms. How could that sort of approach be utilized to responding to what this guy just wrote?
Okay, well, I'll answer after the not break.
Cool.
So how that goes with what we're doing now. It's like the main point of this is there has to be, I think you have to find a way to talk to him in language that he understands, that he won't throw away. Right. Which is what you did, right? You changed the language you were using to get your point across. Because in the end, all of these things, when you're dealing with a socially fraught thing, when you're doing interpersonal interaction, you have to take people where they are. And for example, based on context, there are certain situations where it makes sense for you to give the power fist. And there are others where it makes sense that you should never do that. And then there are other situations where it would make sense for you to do it after someone else does it. Right? You're waiting for permission. Right? So, for this thing, my feeling here is that he's trying to make a point, right? That's what he's doing. He's trying to say that he's trying to undermine the concept of white privilege because he doesn't feel privileged. Right? I mean, I think this is the main problem in all of these things, is we're taking a group of people who either their place in society is so comfortable that they're not aware about how other people are uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And those other people's discomforts are there because they're there to make him comfortable. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's that process of learning is never fun and it's never easy. So yeah, and I'm just so Dorian, it's just how many people are going to be willing to accept societal culpability?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just don't think many people are, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, so Dorian, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If we ratchet this up a notch, right? Because white privilege is ever becoming a more ridiculous phrase. Even though it's describing an actual part of reality, that white people, by and large, have more power than people who aren't white. Now, it's not true across the board, and that's where it gets to be a problem. It's like the phrase Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. If you don't know the context of that phrase, it sounds like a insulting non sequitur. I mean, so it's the same thing with this. It's it's using language in a way that I generally think is they're not good enough slogans. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you need to have a watered down version of Black Lives Matter 2, right? That's dumb, right? But there's another way to sloganize that would so the right is very good at creating slogans that the left can't disagree with.
Pro-life.
Yes.
Oh, so you're saying you're pro-death?
Right. Right. Or referring to Social Security as entitlements.
Yeah.
Or talking about regulation, not talking about our systemic governmental protections as regulations. Mm-hmm. Right? So they're able to frame societal things that we disagree with or things that we like as bad, but the words they choose mean that arguing the phrase is hard. Mm-hmm. But both white privilege and Black Lives Matter are ones in which the people on the other side can literally argue the words. So that's the thing is, when you got a bunch of people who all major in marketing and they're all conservatives, this is what happens. Everybody else majors in law or politics and political science. And it just means that we don't have this, we don't have this way of using words. So, so he wants to argue with this idea that he has some power he doesn't see in his own life. Mm-hmm. Right? So I don't know. It's there's the version of exploring his own power and showing him how it harms other people. There's that. But that's sort of like a one-on-one thing you sort of have to do. Mm-hmm. And they have to be open to it. So it's not something that's conducive to Facebook arguments. Right. The other option in my mind is because who's on Facebook to learn? Almost no one. The other possibility is there is another thing. I'm having trouble pulling it out of my brain here. The other thing is just to couch the same thing in conservative language. Mm-hmm. Right? So you could talk about restricted liberty. Right? So you could say that black people don't have this privilege that you're describing because their liberty and their freedom are restricted. Mm-hmm. In the name of your freedom and your... for example... To use the thing that's the hot button issue right now, all of the we've got police brutality on the brain again, even though it never stops, is that the police, so your average person who likes the police means that they're either middle class or above, and it means that they like the police when they see them because the police make them feel safe. And the reason they feel safe when they see the police is because the police are there to protect them from everyone else. And it just so happens that most black people are in the everybody else category. Right? It's not every black person. But, you know, if it's not like the most powerful person in the United States at some point was a Barack Obama, a black man. And him, after being president, if he was driving a car on a dark road somewhere, the probability that he would get pulled over because he was a black guy and you couldn't tell it was Barack Obama because he somehow got away from his security is pretty high. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Does it mean that he's going to get arrested or beaten up? No, they'll probably notice he's Barack Obama pretty quickly. But still, there are things that are going to happen to him that are unlikely to happen to, you know, your average white person. The problem is we're dealing with averages, and we're dealing with this is the thing about when you argue systemic and structural and institutional problems, is because you're measuring disparities. You're not measuring harm, right?
Yeah.
You're not measuring freedom itself. You're measuring percentage, like you're measuring rates of difference, right? It's like you're measuring an abstract notion. And if anybody demands concrete things except in their God, it's conservative-minded people, right? The usefulness, that everything have a purpose, right? In a sort of like, and if it's too abstract, it's like, what? Why are you bothering me with this?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Does what I'm saying make sense?
Yeah, no, it is making sense. It's
because in the end, the problem we're having, like, so if you go back and you talk, like, so if you go back and look at the 1960s civil rights movement, I mean, they did a good job of couching what they were doing in language that would sort of come across. Or like old union movements, I mean, they talk about solidarity, right? So that's the thing about talking about privilege, is like we can come up with a different phrase for this thing because it's a real thing. Is that phrase makes people believe that they have that it's a way to like break people apart, right? I'm more oppressed than you, and you must recognize my oppression. You must, like, so there's nothing inherently wrong with this as a sort of generalized thing, because, like, for example, in the example you gave, your interaction with your collaborator is a perfect example of checking your privilege, right? So, but we could talk about it in different language and come to the same result that wouldn't bother people because of that phrase, right? You could say that you had an interpersonal reaction with a collaborator of yours in which you overstepped the social boundaries that you didn't know were there because you haven't gotten to know this person well enough. And that's normal social interaction among people. It just happens to be about something that is racially charged, right? The Black Power fist, right? And so, because, you know, any of these movements have always had some white people in them, of course, right? But, you know, but if you're in a certain context in public, you don't know that that's the context. I mean, because if you saw Mitt Romney do the Black Power fist, what would you think?
I would probably think a similar thing to when I saw Beto O'Rourke speak Spanish at the Democratic debates.
Right. It's that kind of like, it comes out as pandering, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing is like, because that kind of interaction delegitimizes the identity and the personhood of the person that's being pandered to. Like they don't have their own freedom and their own sort of safety and stability in the society, right? They have to be protected by you. And that's not something like, so Dorian, she didn't want you to make her safe by you agreeing with her. She wanted to go out on her own space and be a person that was like, you were distracting from that experience.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's like, but here's the deal: is that this is the fundamental nature about power relationships, whether or not we're talking about race or anything else. How the power is distributed. It's that the people who have the more power don't have to consider the other person's wants, needs, or just, anything about what that other person does or thinks or says, just as a matter of course, right? The king doesn't care how his courtier feels, right? But the courtier has to be aware of the swinging of moods of the king. So it just so happens that the way the power gets distributed in certain situations, and that's why it's always down to context here, is because we all have so little power, or it's so distributed, that how it gets reflected is different for every interaction you have. So, and that's the thing, is that's the reason white privilege here gets denigrated, is because it doesn't work 100% of the time. Therefore, in a conservative mind, it's wrong, right? Because example, so this is the reason that the argument of there's no such thing as personal racism doesn't work, because there is personal racism.
Right.
Because racism has many flavors, right? So when you say, I say racism, I mean this, they say, well, if racism's always that, then fuck all this other shit that I don't want to care about.
Yeah.
Right? So it's...
No, it just, in that guy's response, he literally...
he says things you think, and he denigrates them.
Yeah, he literally defined systemic racism, and then was like, that's bullshit. Like,
right.
It was like...
because he has to believe, for his ideology to make sense, he has to believe that the society that he's in is just.
Right.
So that's why social justice warrior is the equivalent of being a racist as a slur these days, right? It's not a slur, but it gets used as one.
Right.
And it's like, wait, you're saying that this person who's advocating for justice is a bad person?
Right.
I mean, what kind of Orwellian language is this?
Yeah.
But it's actually Ayn Randian language, which is Orwell flipped on its head. But this...
My God. I have never thought of Ayn Rand as the opposite of Orwell, and that's unbelievable. Like, that's...
Right.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the way she politicizes language is the exact opposite. So, the way that Orwell talks about language is organized around pointing out that people are using flowery language to spice up ridiculous, bullshit, awful things. And Ayn Rand is literally doing that, but framing it as a wonderful thing to do. Like saying that the people who are, like, she uses the same kind of scenes, but they're about evil liberal people who are saying the right things and want the right things to happen, but they're clearly evil for reasons you can't really gather from the book itself. You have to believe beforehand that the person saying that we should have equality is an evil toady.
There's a YouTuber I really like, thoughtslime. He's an anarchist YouTuber, and he did a book review of the Turner Diaries recently. Because I'm gonna really summarize. But basically, he was like, I wanted to read it because I thought maybe it's like a book that like has some directional thinking, and maybe if I understand this, I'll understand the fascist ideology a little bit more. And he was like, nope, if you read it, you have to already be there to be convinced by any of these arguments. And then the second realm is at the very end, when the book ends, like, it turns into a dystopia, but like run by the white nationalists. Like they literally start wiping people out for not quite like even if they're not guilty, but it's just to really keep everybody in check. And Thoughtslime's response to that was like, well, it did give me some insight into the fascist mindset, because this book's supposed to be their utopia, and they still like their utopia is that you have to always be on edge, and any even like slight amount of relaxation from the hierarchical structure is a problem in itself. Like the hierarchy has to be that firm.
I'm not surprised, but that's wow. So it's this kind of thing, is you have to be willing to argue the gray, and this is the reason that I'm trying to move away from left-wing shibboleth language. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Yes.
So for those of you who don't know the word shibboleth, because you didn't watch West Wing or are very steeped in the Bible, it's just that. So there's a certain amount of being a member of a particular ideological camp that requires that the way you signal that you're in the group is by using certain language. And there's certain parts of left-wing language these days, because it was built inside the academy, in universities, by professors, that is closing off prestige language that just makes you sound like a trite asshole, even though you're describing a real thing that's very important to talk about. So it's like, that's why I don't like talking about white privilege as a thing. Mm-hmm. I like talking about power. Or if I try not to talk about, it's like allyship, right? That's the new buzzword for that thing. Mm-hmm. That thing's important, right? But I think we should just talk about solidarity. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, I mean, if we were required to be like, so think about the political project of achieving socialism in some peaceful fashion, right? Which is a rather small group of people. If you go into your hardcore socialists, they want to murder some people, like your Leninists or whatever. But like, if you want to achieve some sort of better society, you have to get people where they are and get them to sign on to the project of being politically bound to people that are unlike them. Mm-hmm. And this requirement that we all recognize each other's grievances in order to partner is one that is, as far as I could, like, just on a practical level, is just like guaranteed to fail. Mm-hmm. Because if you want a broad-based class coalition to be able to overthrow the ruling class, you're going to have people that don't want to have to sign off on political things for sexual minorities, right? To use a term that I shouldn't use, right? I don't like the letters, just because you just get into 17 of them. But yes, gays and so on, right? And is it a requirement that? We all recognize that there's a base level of joining, right? You have to be okay that those people exist, right? You don't want to end them or something. But there's a certain amount of hard-fought left-wing fight language and things that are never going to be agreed to by the majority of the population, right? And they can move, but so it's. And they're just various things like this. If the requirement that we start with a bunch of grievance meetings where people just list all the ways that they've been harmed in their life and how society does all of these things, you're just never going to get to the point where you can actually, overthrow the society. Right. To be honest,
I feel you, man. I do.
Right. So it means like there is a baseline level of like we can't go this far, but right now I feel like the popular societal language. I'm not talking about like inside the movements themselves, although they're all still kind of diverse and like they're dispersed. They don't really come together very much. Is this the people talk about whether or not cancel culture is a thing, and I don't give a shit about whether cancel culture, the phrase, is a thing. The thing I care about is that this kind of grievance methodology is a way for is a perfect way for the FBI or the CIA to destroy all of this. It's just like, it's like you just got to stand up and start complaining, right? So how do you tell the difference between a real grievance and a fake grievance, or a grievance that is worth changing the group for? Because I'm also a person that advocates that if we want to have a broad-based coalition, you have to allow certain people to increase the number of people that want to participate. You have to modify what you ask for and the things you demand for the people that are in your group.
I mean,
right?
that
like so black liberation is a requirement. What we mean by that phrase might slightly alter depending on what we're trying to get to. But yeah, liberty is something I care about. Do I want to use it the way the right uses it? No. But it really is about liberty and freedom in my mind. So that's the thing. It's like, in the end, Dorian, wouldn't you rather live in we're never going to be a society that's free from race, at least in our lifetimes for sure. But I think both you and your collaborator would rather be living in a society where it didn't, there weren't necessarily gestures that you had to, you would, if I make this gesture, I'm going to, in certain situations I'm good, and other ones I'm like, oh, fuck. But, and helping the person, they don't want to be in that situation either.
Right. Yeah.
None of us want to, these things, nobody wants this.
Right. It's like if I could truly have it my way, I would love to live in a world where it wasn't like, oh God, this thing that happened as a moment of inspiration. I need to be so mindful of each micro act that. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's another one of these words that gets used in this buzzwordy way, but it describes a real thing, is microaggression.
Yeah.
Right, can you imagine how the right feels about the word microaggression?
Oh, God.
Yeah, so but the thing is, it describes a real thing. It's this, that a certain people in certain situations just blatantly ignore the needs, wants, and safety of this other person for reasons that the first person never considers because they never have to. Right? So it's that's the thing that's interesting about this, Dorian, is that so we're taking a situation in which the people, black people by and large, are just they're living in a situation in which they have to be hyper vigilant most of the time. And to be fair, we don't. Sometimes, but not enough. Right?
Yeah.
So it's to me, the answer is to get to a point where nobody has to be hypervigilant. But, I've met enough people that I know that that's not everyone else's goal.
Right.
There are other people that really just want everyone to feel like black people. Or some version of, I was talking with a black woman police officer once, and we were talking about how black children and white children get treated differently by the police. Because white parents can come in and hey, you can't treat my kid this way, blah, 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 right? And the police actually will listen to them sometimes, depending on social status.
Yeah, depending on the economic.
Right, yeah. So, so I was like, well, everybody should be treated like the white kid. And she said a flat out no to me. And I was like, I've thought about this for years now. And I realized it's like the thing she cared, like the way I've sort of tried to piece this together. I should have asked. It was just I was surprised, honestly, because I'm advocating for less policing of people. That's what I want. I'd rather there not be police, but I want less police. I want less police. I want communities to decide how they do things, but not police holding them hostage with military crap. Anyway, the next thought is, well, the way I've tried to make sense of it is that what she wanted is that the law would be applied evenly to everybody. And I think she understood my statement as saying that we should just let everybody get out from under the law. And what I really meant was we should make the law less punitive. Yeah, right? But that's the thing, is like, when you live in an authoritarian society, it means that most people really just want everybody to get beaten up. No one get beaten up. They want, it's like the idea of the rich, it's like the conservative idea of a flat tax. They just love this idea. It's like, well, everyone pays at the same percentage, and that's easy and it's simple, and everyone pays. And it's like, that's not what will happen. I mean, it's just like, right? So it's so deceptively simple as a way to, the reason we have progressive taxation is because rich people don't need 8 refrigerators for every 1 refrigerator I own.
Well, it's like right-wing libertarianism to a certain extent. Like, I totally feel them. It's like, like, if we could all just be on an equal playing field, and then you could really, just be what you want to be, with nothing holding you back. Like, I totally get that. However, your ideology leads to authoritarian fascism. It's through corporations. It's corporate fascism. It's not government fascism.
So, in the end, what I think is, yes, you're right about that. So, I think the answer to this guy is to talk about power rather than privilege.
Yeah.
And to note that power is distributed, not perfectly, but by and large, along racial lines. And this is the danger of this kind of these kinds of discussions, is that conservatives don't want to understand. When he understood your point, he treated it as the most ridiculous malarkey. Right? So,
the thing that makes these conversations very difficult is we're not talking about the same realms.
Right.
The thing... So I'm going to actually state the thing that my brother had said, which I was laughing about because I'm in agreement with my brother, but I also agree with you that I think the tactic is poor, and it's let me be honest. Let me just say one thing here. Yeah.
He's clearly saying a racist thing. I don't think that's wrong.
Yeah.
What your brother said is correct. It's just as a tactic. I'm not convinced of its utility.
Well, here, let me put it this way. I was watching a talk with this group on, they're called Beyond Conflict. They do psychology and neurology research on, like Israeli versus Palestine, Democrat versus Republican, American, Black American versus African immigrant. Like they just do any kind of conflict. They do a lot of study on the human experience. And he gave the guy who was giving the talk gave an incredible answer when asked about punching a Nazi, like punching Richard Spencer, and he was like, "Well, it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to try to develop a way to get Richard Spencer out of the Nazi movement, and it's like, no, that's not going to work. However, if your goal is to incite rage that can lead towards more violent revolution, then yeah, it works.
Right.
So I am, my brother may have a different goal.
Of course.
My goal when engaging with these people is to try to dust off their blind spots and help them find a place that they are at. And I'm realizing that the guy that just responded to me, his goal is also different.
Right, exactly.
His goal is that he's not racist.
Yes, right, because that's the thing that's the only slur, quote unquote, that applies to white people.
Right.
Is racist. And they don't like it.
No.
So, well, in a certain sense, there's a certain technique of, not that I'm advocating this one, but there's a certain technique of, well, you just call them that because that's what it's like to be called a slur. If you feel like it's a slur, then great.
Yeah.
That's what it's like.
Yeah.
Stop using them, damn it. There's a certain kind of like childhoodish bullying that is, right? It is. You are bullying a person when they say unacceptable stuff and looking at them and go, "You're a racist."
Yeah.
So that's why I like to talk about racist language.
Yeah.
Rather than racist people and racist thoughts. You said something racist. I'm not racist. I didn't say you were racist. I said the thing you said was racist.
Yeah.
Do you understand that distinction? It's
yes.
So I'm not you, but yes.
Yeah. No, of
so
course.
It's the last bit is the reason I talk this way is we have minority opinions in a fake democracy. So the only way for us to get the things we want to happen, short of violence, is persuasion. And so I'm mostly interested in persuasion, and if I can't persuade, I want to understand why. So the thing I would be doing, this is why I'm not on Facebook anymore, because you can't do this on Facebook. Is I would ask him, well, why do you say these things? So can you explain this part? So why do you think that? And I would want him basically I'd get to the point where he said his ideology out loud to me. And I'd say, oh, well, that's ideology. Why do you believe that? Right? And then they'd give up or whatever, but at least I would know what they thought better, and I think they would know what they thought better. And I think that's a better way to get people to change their mind. Is to understand that they're just following patterns of thought. It's not.
So to dig just like the last comment that I'm going to have in this. You know how we've spoken at length about the thing about the extreme right and the people who self-identify as fascist. The thing that's so fascinating about them is they have incredibly accurate diagnosis of systemic problems. They diagnose the issues very accurately, but their conclusions and or solutions are horrifying. Misguided at the least, and existentially devastating at the most. Sometimes I pop on neo-Nazi blogs, and I pop on just like alt-right places just to see what they're saying, and it's really wild. I was reading an article by Andrew Anglin, the fucking Daily Stormer guy, the awful Nazi, and he had an article where he was showing times where a conservative was called a racist and the conservative denied, like a Republican, like somebody in Congress or something like that, and the Republican denied being racist. And Andrew Anglin pointed out, he was like, you see what this is? Like, we have a language set up where racist equals evil. And I was kind of like, wow, man, that's you analyze the systemic issue. Like, we think of things in a binary as racist bad, not racist good, when you cannot be a racist and still be very racist. Now, of course, he was bringing this up again in a horrifying way. He
wanted to advocate that being racist was a good thing.
Yes. Yeah. But again, his diagnosis, it was accurate. But yeah, so I don't know, man. It's I'm gonna get back in on this social media thing after this, just to, it's a tactic. I am genuinely, I don't know. I'm genuinely curious. I'm also genuinely curious what my brother's tactic is, like what he is hoping the end game is, or if it's just to, I have a feeling it's straight up to just let them know that it's like, this opinion's not welcome. I don't care how you feel. Like,
shame is the main thing that's happening these days.
Yeah,
that's why I think that it's not working. Because shame can work, but it doesn't work as well as you might hope.
Yeah.
So let me end with one thing, and then we'll
Great.
go. This is I was talking to my wife, I don't know, earlier this week. Just sort of racism in our society, the word and the usage of it. Basically, the two main categories of people, which don't include us or those crazy people on the right, is there are basically your Republican politicians who say that they aren't racist because they believe in color blindness. Right? We know how ineffective that is, but that's what they think. And so they're not racist, according to themselves. Then we have the liberals and the Democrats and so on. And they believe in systemic racism, but they really would rather not do anything about it. They try, but their solutions don't really do much. Because they don't want to lose their class privilege. So they end up using racism in a cynical way as a way to point out Republicans as racist. And the Republicans say, well, you're the actual racist because you're the people who pay attention to it, and then you don't do anything about it. Right? So the Republicans honestly believe that they're not racist because they believe in colorblindness, and that the real racists are the people on the left who advocate for systemic change and then never do it. Because they're the ones using it cynically. And the thing that's weird is that I think the Republicans are reading it right. But the thing is, they're wrong that they're not racist.
Oh yeah.
but they notice the language, and they're right that the Democrats are hypocrites.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that's crazy, is because they're both racist. So it's like, that's the thing that drives me nuts about it. So anyway.
Yeah.
That's what this is like. So you're going to be arguing with a guy who doesn't believe he's racist because color blindness is a de facto ideological position that will guarantee the best results according to the way he thinks.
Yeah.
So good luck getting away from that. So
yeah,
that's it.
it's like, just even now, I haven't gotten a response from the original commentator, just somebody that knows him. Right. But already I've gotten 10 likes on my comment, but then the response also got 5 likes. So, so we,
good luck on
good luck at losing an argument that you were never going to win.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that Facebook isn't for discussions. Facebook is for winning.
I will say, just on debate theory, like social media debate, my goal is never to win a debate. My goal is to let other people see the debate.
Right. Well, of course. Right. Yeah. No. I think you have Dorian, you have a very well thought out and useful way of using social media. The thing I want to do with it isn't possible, so I don't.
Yeah, exactly. What do you want to do with it? Just
have real conversations where I actually find out what people's actual ideology is.
Right.
And that never happens.
Right.
You argue about whether or not racism means this or that.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, do they really believe that color blindness is the solution?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they believe that hierarchy is the thing that we need to guarantee more than democracy?
Mm-hmm.
Does liberty for them mean liberty for just them?
The way I heard it in psychological terms is the further right you go, the more you believe in nature, and the further left you go, the more you believe in nurture.
Right.
And that can be done through libertarian or authoritarian means as well.
Of course.
But it, and to be totally upfront, the research in psychology is showing in a general sense that children are 60% more nurture than nature, which I think is one reason I already lean left to begin with.
But it's important to recognize that 40% is a rather large amount of nature.
Oh yeah. No, it's it's really almost 50-50, which is like another way to think about it. The thing is that the reason I lean as left as I do, which is really fucking far left, to be honest, at this point. It's that yes, like nurture is more important than nature, and in fact, we use the nature argument to enforce like a forced nurturing. Like we're not actually being nature. We're not actually letting our natural selves flourish because we're nurtured so hard. I don't know, through manufacturing consent. Propaganda. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right, y'all. Peace, and we seem to actually have a Monday spot now to record these to put them out later in the week. So if you listened, all 5 of you, we'll see you next time. This is Trysteropod.